Okay, so this is musicians and works numbers 31 through 45 in the list that corresponds with my study guide over music for Quiz Bowl. I think there are 30 toss-ups, so let's go ahead and get started. Good luck. Toss-up 1. One of this composer's pieces for solo piano opens in pianissimo with the left hand playing the notes B-flat, C, D, G, up and down. The eighth of his preludes was inspired by Le Conte de Lisle poem, and other works in that collection include What the West Wind Saw and The Sunken Cathedral. Movements entitled Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum and Gallywog's Cakewalk begin and end this composer's children's corner suite. Another of his pieces imitates a satyr playing the panpipes. The third movement of his Suite Bergamesque was inspired by a Paul Verlaine poem that evokes moonlight. For 10 points, name this composer of Prelude to the Afternoon of Faun and Clair de Lune. And that is Claude Debussy. Toss-up 2. The second movement of this musical piece borrows from a theme composed by Jean-Philippe Rameau. Two violins in another section of this work alternate between playing very high and low notes, and another movement features musicians practicing their scales. This composition, which features sections like People with Long Ears and Pianists, alludes to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. In a movement that uses the rattling of a xylophone to represent the noises of a skeleton and references its composer's earlier work, Danse Macabre. For 10 points, identify this piece by Camille Saint-Saëns with movements like the elephant, fossils, and the swan. And that is, of course, Carnival of the Animals. Toss-up number 3. This composer, who entered a competition with his sonatine, dedicated each of 5 movements of one work to fellow hooligans such as Sad Birds and A Boat on the Ocean. One work by this composer frequently requotes a melody beginning with a sustained high C, followed by B, C, D, C, B, A, C. Each of 6 movements of Piano Suite by this composer honors a different soldier. He's not Russian, but this composer of Daphnis and Chloe orchestrated pictures at an exhibition. This composer of Miroir and Pavan for A Dead Princess wrote a piece for Ida Rubinstein, which begins with a flute playing over a snare drum ostinato. For 10 points, name this French composer who wrote Bolero. And that is Maurice Ravel. Toss-up number 4. This opera's most famous aria begins Recitar mentre presso dal delirio, and was famously recorded by Enrico Caruso. A character in this opera sings I Know You Hate Me while getting whipped. It begins with a baritone telling the audience that the story that they are about to watch is about real people. In a play within this opera, Netta becomes Columbina, Tonio becomes Taddeo, and Canio becomes the title figure. Canio, after stabbing Netta, ends this opera by singing The Comedy's Over. For 10 points, name this Verismo opera containing Vesti la Giubia, a Ruggero Leoncavallo work about some sad clowns. And that is I Pagliacci. Toss-up number 5. The first movement of one of this man's pieces is thought to be based on the Fibonacci sequence, and none of the movements in that composition have a key signature. This composer of music for strings, percussion, and celesta also wrote a set of 153 pieces for piano that got progressively more difficult. He also wrote a ballet in which embracing a dancing girl causes a Chinese man to die from stab wounds. This composer of Microcosmos and The Miraculous Mandarin also wrote an opera in which Judith sees a pool of tears in the 6th of the title figure's 7 rooms. For 10 points, name this Hungarian composer of Duke Bluebeard's Castle. And that is Bela Bartok. Toss-up number 6. The penultimate section of this work was adapted into Land of the Rising Sun, the national anthem of Biafra, and other uses for that same tune include A Prayer for Wales and We Rest on Thee. When it was first performed, it was the last of 4 movements, the other 3 of which were later published as Scenes Historiques. For a while, it had to be performed under the title Impromptu due to Russian rule, but the name by which it goes today was first suggested by Axel Karpelan, a fan of this work. Words for the penultimate section were written first by Wino Sola and then rewritten 2 years later by V.A. Koskiniemi to support the namesake nation in a war against Russia. For 10 points, name this tome poem about the native land of composer Jean Sibelius. And that is Finlandia. Toss-up number 7. A cadenza layered with an ossia highlights the opening Allegro ma non tanto movement of a work by this composer, which he said was written for elephants. A C minor solo work by this man starts the crescendoing chords that resemble a bell tolling. This composer of 4 piano concerti was inspired by an Arthur Brocklin painting to write The Isle of the Dead. One of his preludes is sometimes referred to as The Bells of Moscow. This composer prepared many of his piano works himself, including a set set of 24 variations on the 24th Caprice for violin. For 10 points, name this Russian composer of a rhapsody on a theme of Paganini. And that is Sergei Rachmaninoff. Toss-up number 8. In this opera, a tenor character finds a woman's key before touching her cold hand in the aria Che gelida manina, and another character smashes a plate complaining about cafe service to Alcindoro before singing the seductive Quando me vo. At the start of this opera, two characters burn a 5-act manuscript and keep warm before Schaunard and Colleen arrive. Its main characters are the painter Marcello, who reunites with Musetta, and the playwright Rodolfo, whose love, Mimi, dies in his arms of tuberculosis. For 10 points, name this Puccini opera about starving Parisian artists, an inspiration for the musical Rent. And that is La Bohème. Toss-up number 9. After this composer tore out the title page of his string quartet number 5 in F minor, he used its andante movement as the basis for his romance in F minor, written for violin and orchestra. This composer suggested that his pupil, Youssef Souk, write a serenade for strings, and also wrote his own such serenade for strings in E major. This man depicted the Furiant and Dumka folk styles in a series of 16 pieces for piano duo that were orchestrated at the request of Johannes Brahms, whose own Hungarian dances inspired those dances. In this composer's best-known symphony, a solo for English horn introduces the first theme of the Largo second movement. For 10 points, name this composer of the Slavonic dances and a symphony from the New World. And that is Dvorak. Toss-up number 10. One character in this work scolds the title character for being in the meadow, while another character, played by the oboe, avoids a cat by swimming to the center of a lake. A flute is used to represent a character that distracts another character by flying in circles, and the protagonist of this work catches the antagonist with a lasso. The woodwinds represent the hunters in this work, and a bassoon is used to represent the grandfather of the title boy. For 10 points, name this piece in which the French horn is used to represent the title animal, a work by Sergei Prokofiev. And that is Peter and the Wolf. Toss-up number 11. At the end of Act 1 of this opera, one character sings Vogliatemi bene, or Love Me Please, as well as a part of a long love duet. A child named Sorrow in this opera, in which the Bonze renounces his niece for changing religions. One character in this opera wonders when a robin makes its nest and sings Un bel dì, or One Beautiful Day. Goro prepares the marriage of the title character and tries to convince the male lead to be faithful. That male lead of this opera is the American naval officer Pinkerton. Cho-Cho-san commits suicide at the end of, for 10 points, what opera by Giacomo Puccini about the title Japanese woman? And that is Madame Butterfly. Toss-up number 12. This man composed his first violin concerto for Pablo de Sarasate, for whom he also composed the introduction and Rondo Capriccioso. This composer's third symphony was dedicated to Liszt and featured an instrument mastered by Widor and Guimont. He wrote a slowed-down version of Offenbach's can-can music in one work. This composer of an organ symphony and Danse Macabre also musically depicted fossils, tortoises, and the elephant. For 10 points, name this French composer who wrote The Carnival of the Animals. And that is Camille Saint-Saëns. Toss-up number 13. It is believed the composer was in Egypt premiering his commercial failure Guntram when he first purchased the inspiration for this work. One section of this work sees the main character fall for a rendition of a Viennese waltz in the dance song, while its final section sees a bell ring 12 times, based on the passage, O man, take heed, and is titled The Night Wanderer Song. One section in the interval of fifth and octave is believed to represent the theme of the world riddle. This piece opens with a section titled Sunrise or Dawn, which contains the nature motif, a C-G-C note sequence. For 10 points, the motif to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey can be found in what famous tone poem by Richard Strauss? And that is also Sprach Zarathustra. Toss-up number 14. One of this man's compositions was inspired by a George Meredith poem about a creature that takes flight till lost on his aerial wings in light. A bold young sailor and the captain's apprentice are tunes in this man's Norfolk Rhapsody number 1, and he also wrote a work inspired by a much earlier English composer, Thomas Tallis. For 10 points, name this British composer of The Lark Ascending and Fantasia on Greensleeves. That is Ralph Vaughan Williams. Vaughan Williams. Toss-up number 15. In Act 2 of this opera, a gavotte is heard from outside the palace during a victory celebration in honor of General Melas. The male lead contrasts the blue eyes of an unknown beauty he has seen in the church with the black eyes of his lover in Recondita Armonia. The villain uses a fan to arouse the title character's jealousy to convince her to betray Angelotti in exchange for her lover's life. That title character asks God why she has suffered such misfortune in Visidarte Visidamore, and jumps to her death after realizing that Cavaradossi's fake execution was real after all. For 10 points, name this opera in which the title singer stabs the wicked police chief Scarpia by Giacomo Puccini. And that is Tosca. It ran blank for a second. Toss-up number 16. He's not Tchaikovsky, but a dotted viola rhythm in 6/8 opens this composer's E minor serenade for strings. According to Michael Kennedy, this composer's trademark, Nobilmente, directs the first occurs in his Concaine Overture. This composer used woodwinds to parody Dora Penny's stutter and depicted his wife Caroline in a piece that includes a movement title for his publisher, Augustus Jaeger. In a 1965 recording by Jacqueline Dupre revived this composer's cello concerto in E minor. The song, Land of Hope and Glory, is based on this man's most famous piece, traditionally performed at graduations. For 10 points, name this British composer of the Enigma Variations and Pomp and Circumstance Marches. And that is Elgar. Toss-up number 17. In one orchestral work by this composer, a slow crescendo of a B minor theme builds from low-pitched instruments to a prestissimo finale. This composer included sarabande and rigadon movements in a work commemorating the 200th anniversary of a noted playwright, his Holberg Suite. Anton Seidel helped orchestrate a set of 66 works by this composer that include Wedding Day at Trollhaugen and March of the Trolls. This composer of lyric pieces also wrote Morning Mood to begin the fourth act of a play. For 10 points, named this composer who wrote In the Hall of Mountain King as a part of his incidental music to Ibsen's Peer Gynt. And that is Edvard Grieg. Toss-up number 18. The third movement of this composer's first symphony is a type of French music called a gavotte, or a gavotte. One of his ballets is The Prodigal Son, and another includes Dance of the Nights. In one of his composer's operas, Trufaldino knocks over Fata Morgana, causing the prince to laugh. That prince, the son of the king of clubs, becomes obsessed with some fruit. Another work by this composer features an argument between a bird and a duck. In that work, the bird has a theme performed on flute, and the duck has a theme performed on oboe. For 10 points, name this composer of The Love for Three Oranges and Peter and the Wolf. And that is Prokofiev. Toss-up 19. Pierre Boulez claims that this piece's title character brought new breath to the art of music, and Gustave Doré conducted its premiere. The final paraphrase intended to accompany this work was never finished. The oboe restates the main theme of this piece before the coda, and only brass in this piece are 4 muted horns. The main melody of this piece includes a chromatic descent from C sharp to G and back. It features harp glissandos to depict the world of nymphs, and the solo flute that opens this piece imitates the title character's pipes. For 10 points, name this piece based on a Stéphane Mallarmé poem that depicts a satyr's life by Claude Debussy. And that is Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. Toss-up number 20. The composer of this work wrote that he simply developed original themes with all the resources of modern rhythms, counterpoint, and orchestral color. 3 movements in E minor surround the second movement of this work, which contains a cor anglais melody, is played at largo tempo, and was based on the Song of Hiawatha. In the first movement of this symphony, by composer of Slavonic dances and the American Quartet, a solo flute plays the Swing Low, Sweet Chariot theme. This piece was inspired by African American spirituals. For 10 points, name this last symphony of Antonin Dvorak. And that would be From the New World Symphony. Toss-up number 21. One opera by this composer sees Buoso Donati's bequeathal of his fortune to the monastery impede Rinuccio's marriage to Lauretta, who pleads to her father in the aria, O mio babino caro. This composer of Gianni Schicchi wrote another opera in which Visidarte is sang by the title character after Baron Scarpia offers to free her lover if she sleeps with him. The unknown Prince Calaf sings Nessun Dorma after correctly answering 3 challenges issued by the title princess in another of his works. Pinkerton's betrayal leads Cho-Cho-San to commit suicide in an opera by, for 10 points, what Italian composer of Turandot, Tosca, and Madame Butterfly. and that is Puccini. Puccini. Toss-up number 22. Serge Lifar and Leonid Lavrovsky were among the choreographers who've revised this one-act ballet, originally staged by Bronislava Nijinsky in a version starring Ida Rubinstein. Said by its composer to be made for performance in factories, its score occasionally departs from the main key of C major. However, its tempo and content remain unchanged throughout. The only other dynamic aspects of the music for this piece are the rotation of the melody among different instruments and a steady crescendo. For 10 points, name this 1928 ballet adapted from a Spanish folk dance by Maurice Ravel, and that is Bolero. Toss-up 23. Shortly before stabbing herself, one character in this opera tells another that the ice she wraps herself in will be defeated by the fire of love. That character in this opera had previously pleaded with the hero in Signore Ascoti. At its premiere, Toscanini stopped the performance at the point in Act 3 where he claimed the composer had died writing it. It features Tu che di gel sei cinta and an aria that ends with the tenor declaring Vincero, because the title character doesn't know his name. A challenge in this opera is met by striking a gong 3 times and invites the derision of ping, pang, and pong. It features the aria Nessun Dorma. Liu aids Prince Kalaf in for 10 points. What opera about the title Chinese princess, the final work of Giacomo Puccini? And that is Turandot. Toss-up 24. This composer ended a set of orchestral songs with a poem that ends, is it perhaps death? I'm Abendro. One of his characters wonders about little Resi from the convent and admits that she sometimes stops all the clocks in the middle of the night. An opera by this composer ends with a young black page scurrying off the stage. This composer used 3 Hesse poems in his 4 last songs and wrote a role for a woman who resolves to love a young count fully, loving even his love for another. That sentiment is expressed after Baron Oakes fails to marry Sophie, a girl who sings a trio with Octavian and the Marschallin. For 10 points, name this composer of Der Rosenkavalier and also Sprach Zarathustra, and that is Richard Strauss. Toss-up 25. One section of this piece depicts a stormy evening on the sea during the homecoming of the main character who had earlier met a Bedouin who performs Anitra's dance. A lullaby is sung by Solveig in the last of 8 movements in this work, sometimes arranged in 2 suites. One section of this piece begins quietly with staccato 8 notes before frantically gaining in volume and tempo as the main character flees trolls, while during another an oboe and flute play as the sun rises. Morning Mood and In the Hall of the Mountain King are pieces from, for 10 points, what incidental music composed by Edvard Grieg for a Heinrich Ibsen play? And that is Peer Gynt. Peer Gynt. Toss-up number 26. This musical piece gained popularity when it was performed for its composer shortly after his oratorio, The Light of Life. The notes in the most popular theme of this piece are in order: half, eighth, eighth, quarter, half, half. The most famous of this group of 6 marches is the 5th one. That was the first one, which is dedicated to Alfred E. Rodewald. That march contains the trio theme known as Land of Hope and Glory, and it was played when the composer of this piece received an honorary degree from Yale in 1905. This piece was played more than once at its premiere, and it is often played over and over again by school orchestras. For 10 points, name this Edvard Elgar piece played at graduations, and that is Pomp and Circumstance. Toss-up number 27. The song, The Heavenly Life, inspired a work by this composer that begins with a theme played by flutes and sleigh bells, and another work by this composer of the Song of Lamentation. A trumpet solo begins a C-sharp minor funeral march. This composer's settings of Des Knaben Wunderhorn include the Ulricht 4th movement of one work, and his first symphony takes its title from a Jean Paul novel. This composer set Frederick Ruckert poems to music in Kinder Totenlieder, and he included 3 hammer blows of the finale of his 80-minute-long tragic symphony. For 10 points, name this Romantic-era composer of The Song of the Earth and Symphony of a Thousand. And that is Mahler, Gustav Mahler. Toss-up 28. The composer of this work quotes Felix Mendelssohn's Calm Sea and Prosperous Voyage in its 13th section, which is identified by only 3 asterisks to represent a ship in the distance. One section of this work mimics a man changing the pitch of his voice, while another section, entitled RPA, pays homage to the son of Matthew Arnold. The most famous movement, however, is thought to have been inspired by a nighttime conversation between the composer and his best friend, and is entitled Nimrod. Consisting of 14 distinct sections, for 10 points, name this orchestral work written by Edward Elgar to commemorate his friends pictured within. and that is the Enigma Variations. Toss-up number 29. This composer's final symphony was originally premiered as a symphonic fantasia and is single movement in C major. After composing his 7 symphonies, this man entered the silence at Yarvinpah, where he produced little music during his final 30 years. He used the English horn to depict the title creature in the waters of the underworld in a tone poem, and another opens with a brass chorale in F-sharp minor. He was forced to use the title impromptu for one of his pieces to avoid Russian censors. This man's Lemminikainen suite contains the Swan of Tuonela. For 10 points, name this Finnish composer of Finlandia. And that is, of course, Sibelius. So there was only 29 instead of 30. Good luck, keep studying, keep learning, and hopefully this is of some help. Thanks.